Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The crisp white collar and cuffs added a touch of elegance to the ensemble, perfectly capturing the essence of 1950s fashion she adored. Running her hands down the smooth fabric, Trisha couldn't help but smile. It had been a long journey to reach this point, but she finally felt comfortable in her own skin. Growing up in the late 50s and 60s, she had always been drawn to the glamorous styles of the era, secretly trying on her mother's clothes when no one was home. For years, Trisha had lived a double life, presenting as a man to the outside world while nurturing her true self behind closed doors. It wasn't until a car accident 2 years ago that everything changed. The hormonal shift caused by the trauma had awakened something within her, and she could no longer deny her identity as a woman. Turning away from the mirror, Trisha made her way to the sewing machine set up in the corner of her bedroom. Fabric swatches and patterns were strewn across the desk, a testament to her passion for creating her own wardrobe. She sat down, running her fingers over the cool metal of the machine, feeling a sense of pride in her craftsmanship. As she began to work on her latest project, an emerald green pencil skirt, Trisha's mind wandered to the upcoming cross-dressing support group meeting. She had been attending for a few months now, hoping to find companionship and understanding among like-minded individuals. While she had made a few acquaintances, she still felt a lingering sense of loneliness. The rhythmic hum of the sewing machine filled the room as Trisha carefully guided the fabric through. She lost herself in the familiar motions, her thoughts drifting to the other members of the group. There was Carolyn, a tall redhead with a penchant for vintage hats, and Marcus, who preferred the mod styles of the 60s. While they were all friendly enough, Trisha couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Trisha put the finishing touches on her skirt. She held it up, admiring the clean lines and perfect stitching. It would pair beautifully with the white blouse she had completed last week. With a sigh, she glanced at the clock on the wall. It was time to get ready for the meeting. Trisha carefully hung up her new creation and began to prepare herself for the evening ahead. An hour later, Trisha found herself walking into the community center where the support group met. The click of her heels echoed in the hallway as she made her way to the familiar room. Inside, a small group had already gathered, their voices a low murmur of conversation. "Trisha, over here, darling." Carolyn waved from across the room, her vibrant red hair peeking out from under a wide-brimmed hat adorned with silk flowers. Making her way over, Trisha smiled warmly at her friend. "Hello, Carolyn. That hat is absolutely divine. Is it new?" Carolyn beamed, tilting her head to show off the accessory. "Just finished it yesterday. I was inspired by that lovely floral dress you wore last week." The two women chatted amiably as more members filtered into the room. Soon, the meeting was called to order, and everyone took their seats in a circle. As usual, they began with introductions and updates from each member. When it was Trisha's turn, she smoothed her skirt and spoke softly. "Hello, everyone. I'm Trisha, and I've been attending these meetings for about 3 months now. I'm still working on building my confidence to go out more often, but I've been keeping busy with my sewing projects." The group nodded encouragingly, and Trisha felt a small spark of warmth in her chest. It was nice to be understood, even if she hadn't found that deep connection she longed for. As the meeting progressed, Trisha found her attention wandering. She observed the other members, noting their different styles and mannerisms. There was a new face in the group, a nervous-looking individual who introduced themselves as Jamie. Trisha offered a reassuring smile, remembering her own first meeting. After the formal part of the meeting concluded, people broke off into smaller groups to socialize. Trisha found herself drawn into a conversation with Carolyn and Marcus about their favorite designers from the 50s and 60s. "I've always been partial to Christian Dior's new look," Trisha said, her eyes lighting up with passion. The way he emphasized the feminine silhouette was revolutionary. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely, but for me, it's all about Mary Quant and the miniskirt. Talk about a fashion revolution." As they chatted, Trisha couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging. These people understood her love for a bygone era, her desire to express herself through fashion. Yet, as the evening wore on, that familiar ache of loneliness began to creep in once more. When the meeting finally came to an end, Trisha said her goodbyes and stepped out into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional barking dog. She began the walk home, her heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. Lost in thought, Trisha didn't notice the police cruiser slowing down beside her until a gruff voice called out, "Hey you! Stop right there!" Her heart racing, Trisha froze in place. She turned slowly to face the officer who had stepped out of the car, his face twisted in a sneer. "Well, what do we have here?" The officer's eyes raked over Trisha's figure, his tone dripping with disdain. "Ain't you a pretty little thing? What are you doing out here dressed like that?" Trisha swallowed hard, willing her voice not to shake. "I'm just walking home, officer. I haven't done anything wrong." The officer took a step closer, invading Trisha's personal space. "Is that so? You know it's illegal to impersonate a woman. Maybe I should take you down to the station, see what other laws you've been breaking." Fear gripped Trisha's heart, but she stood her ground. "I'm not impersonating anyone, officer. This is who I am. I have the right to dress and express myself as I choose." The officer's face darkened with anger. "Listen here, you freak. I don't want to see you parading around my streets like this again. Next time I won't be so nice." With that, he roughly shoved Trisha aside and stormed back to his cruiser. As the car sped away, Trisha leaned against a nearby wall, her legs trembling. She took several deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. The encounter left Trisha shaken, and she hurried home, constantly looking over her shoulder. Once safely inside her apartment, she leaned against the closed door, tears streaming down her face. The officer's words echoed in her mind, reigniting all the fears and doubts she had worked so hard to overcome. As the days passed, Trisha found herself growing increasingly paranoid. She began to limit her outings, only venturing out when absolutely necessary. The joy she once found in dressing up and expressing herself was overshadowed by the fear of encountering that officer again. One afternoon, as Trisha sat at her sewing machine working on a new dress, the phone rang. She hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice quiet and cautious. "Hello?" "Trisha, it's Carolyn. We've missed you at the meetings. Is everything okay?" Hearing her friend's concerned voice, Trisha felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she needed to talk to someone who understood. "Oh, Carolyn," Trisha's voice cracked. "Something happened after the last meeting. I had a run-in with a police officer." As Trisha recounted the incident, Carolyn listened patiently, offering words of support and encouragement. When Trisha finished, there was a moment of silence before Carolyn spoke. "Trisha, darling, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But you can't let one bigoted officer dictate your life. You have every right to be yourself." Trisha sighed, twirling the phone cord around her finger. "I know, but I'm scared. What if he follows through on his threat?" "Then we'll face it together," Carolyn said firmly. "The whole group will have your back. In fact, why don't you come over to my place tomorrow? We can have tea and work on some sewing projects together. What do you say?" A small smile tugged at Trisha's lips. That sounds lovely, Carolyn. Thank you." The next day, Trisha found herself standing outside Carolyn's charming craftsman-style home. She had chosen a simple A-line dress in a soft powder blue, paired with low heels. It was a more subdued look than she usually preferred, but it helped her feel less conspicuous. Carolyn greeted her with a warm hug and ushered her inside. The house was a reflection of its owner, vibrant, eclectic, and full of vintage charm. Hats of various styles and colors adorned the walls, and bolts of fabric were stacked neatly in a corner. "Make yourself at home, dear," Carolyn said, gesturing to a cozy sitting area. "I'll fetch us some tea." As Trisha settled onto the floral-patterned sofa, she felt some of the tension leave her body. The familiar scents of fabric and brewing tea filled the air, creating a comforting atmosphere. Carolyn returned with a tray of tea and cookies, setting it down on the coffee table. As she poured, she gave Trisha a gentle smile. "Now then, why don't you tell me what you've been working on lately?" For the next few hours, the two women lost themselves in conversation about fashion, sewing techniques, and their favorite designers. Trisha found herself relaxing, her earlier fears fading into the background as she immersed herself in her passion. As the afternoon wore on, Carolyn brought out some of her latest hat creations, modeling them for Trisha. "What do you think of this one?" she asked, donning a pillbox hat adorned with delicate lace. Trisha's eyes lit up. "It's stunning! The lacework is exquisite!" "You know, I have a dress that would pair perfectly with that." Carolyn's face broke into a mischievous grin. "Well then, why don't we have ourselves a little fashion show? I have plenty of outfits we can try on." For a moment, Trisha hesitated, the memory of the officer's threat flashing through her mind. But looking at Carolyn's eager face and the array of beautiful clothes surrounding them, she felt a spark of defiance ignite within her. "You know what? That sounds like a marvelous idea," Trisha said, her voice growing stronger. "Let's do it." The two women spent the next hour trying on various outfits, mixing and matching pieces from different eras. They laughed and twirled, complimenting each other's choices and offering styling suggestions. For Trisha, it was a liberating experience, reminding her of the joy and confidence she found in expressing herself through fashion. As the impromptu fashion show came to an end, Trisha found herself standing in front of Carolyn's full-length mirror, wearing a stunning emerald green cocktail dress from the late 50s. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, its full skirt swishing elegantly as she moved. Carolyn appeared behind her, placing a matching pillbox hat atop Trisha's carefully styled hair. "There," she said softly. "Now that's the Trisha I know. Beautiful, confident, and unapologetically herself." Trisha's eyes welled up with tears as she looked at her reflection. For the first time since the incident with the officer, she truly saw herself again. Not a frightened shadow, but a woman proud of who she was. Turning to face Carolyn, Trisha pulled her friend into a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed this more than I realized." Carolyn patted her back gently. "That's what friends are for, darling. Now, how about we take these fabulous outfits for a spin? And there's a lovely little cafe down the street that does a marvelous afternoon tea." Trisha hesitated for a moment, her earlier fears threatening to resurface. But looking at her reflection once more, she straightened her shoulders and nodded. "You're right. We can't let fear keep us hidden away. Let's go show the world how fabulous we are." Arm in arm, the two women left the house, their heels clicking in unison on the sidewalk. As they walked, Trisha felt a renewed sense of purpose and strength. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but with friends like Carolyn by her side, she felt ready to face them. The cafe was a quaint little place, with checkered tablecloths and the soft clink of china filling the air. As Trisha and Carolyn were seated, they drew admiring glances from other patrons. Instead of shrinking away, Trisha found herself sitting up straighter, a small smile playing on her lips. As they sipped their tea and nibbled on delicate sandwiches, Carolyn leaned in conspiratorially. "You know, Trisha, I've been thinking, what happened to you with that officer? It's not right. We shouldn't have to live in fear just for being ourselves." Trisha nodded, her brow furrowing. "I know, but what can we do? It's not like we can change people's minds overnight." Carolyn's eyes sparkled with determination. "Maybe not overnight, but we can start making changes. What if we organized some kind of event? Something to raise awareness and show people that we're just regular folks trying to live our lives." The idea took root in Trisha's mind, growing with each passing moment. That's not a bad idea, actually. We could showcase our fashion, maybe even put on a little show. It could be educational and entertaining." As they continued to brainstorm, their excitement grew. By the time they left the cafe, they had the beginnings of a plan forming. Trisha felt a renewed sense of purpose, her earlier fears replaced by determination. Over the next few weeks, Trisha threw herself into planning the event with Carolyn and other members of their support group. They decided to host a vintage fashion show, highlighting styles from the 50s and 60s while also educating the public about gender expression and identity. Trisha spent countless hours at her sewing machine, creating new outfits not just for herself, but for other members of the group as well. She found joy in tailoring each piece to suit the individual, celebrating their unique styles and personalities. As the day of the event approached, Trisha's nerves began to build. What if no one showed up? What if they faced hostility or ridicule? But each time doubts crept in, she reminded herself of the strength she had found within herself and the support of her friends. The morning of the fashion show dawned bright and clear. Trisha stood backstage in the community center's auditorium, surrounded by racks of colorful clothing and the excited chatter of her fellow models. She smoothed down her first outfit, a pale pink swing dress with a sweetheart neckline, paired with a matching pillbox hat. Carolyn appeared at her side, resplendent in a bold floral print dress and one of her signature wide-brimmed hats. "How are you feeling, darling?" Trisha took a deep breath, willing her hands to stop shaking. "Nervous, but excited. I just hope we can make a difference." Carolyn squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We already have, Trisha. Look at all of us here, ready to show the world who we truly are. That's a victory in itself." As the auditorium began to fill with curious spectators, Trisha peeked out from behind the curtain. To her surprise and delight, she saw a diverse crowd gathering, families, young couples, even a few seniors. Her heart swelled with hope. The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the audience. Trisha took her place in line, waiting for her cue. As the music started and the first model stepped out onto the runway, she felt a surge of pride and excitement. When it was her turn, Trisha took a deep breath and stepped out into the spotlight. The warmth of the lights enveloped her as she glided down the runway, her dress swishing gracefully with each step. She could hear murmurs of appreciation from the audience, and a smile spread across her face. As she reached the end of the runway, Trisha paused, striking a pose that channeled the glamour of her favorite 50s movie stars. In that moment, she felt truly seen and appreciated for who she was. The fashion show was a resounding success. As Trisha and the other models took their final bow, the audience erupted in applause. Backstage, there were tears of joy and tight hugs as the group celebrated their achievement. In the days that followed, Trisha was surprised to find positive articles about the event in local newspapers, and even a small segment on the local news. People were talking about gender expression and identity in a way they hadn't before, and it felt like a small but significant step forward. One evening, as Trisha was returning home from a late-night sewing session at Carolyn's, she noticed a familiar police cruiser parked near her apartment. Her heart raced as she recognized the officer who had harassed her weeks ago. For a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm her. But then she thought of the fashion show, of the strength she had found in being true to herself. Squaring her shoulders, Trisha walked confidently towards her building, her heels clicking purposefully on the pavement. The officer's head turned at the sound, his eyes widening in recognition. Trisha braced herself for another confrontation, but to her surprise, the officer's expression shifted from shock to something that looked almost like shame. As Trisha passed by, the officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, nodding slightly before turning away. That single word, that small acknowledgement, felt like a victory. Trisha entered her building with her head held high, feeling a sense of validation she had never experienced before. Trisha's confidence grew with each passing day. She no longer hesitated to go out in public dressed as her true self, and she found joy in mentoring younger individuals who were just beginning their journey of self-discovery. 1 year after the fateful encounter with the police officer, Trisha stood in front of her mirror once again. This time, she wore a stunning red evening gown, custom-made for a charity gala she was attending as a guest speaker. As she put the finishing touches on her makeup, Trisha smiled at her reflection. The woman staring back at her was strong, confident, and unafraid to be herself. She had come so far from the scared individual who had once hidden away in her apartment. With one final adjustment to her perfectly coiffed hair, Trisha grabbed her clutch and headed out the door. She had a story to tell and a difference to make, one sequin at a time. As she stepped out into the warm evening air, Trisha felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge had led her to this moment. She was finally living as her authentic self, surrounded by a community that accepted and celebrated her. The gala was being held at a grand hotel downtown, its facade lit up with twinkling lights. As Trisha approached the entrance, she could hear the soft strains of music drifting out into the night. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and walked in, ready to share her story with the world. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. Trisha made her way through the crowd, exchanging smiles and greetings with familiar faces. She spotted Carolyn across the room, resplendent in a midnight blue gown and an elaborate feathered fascinator. As the evening progressed, Trisha found herself engaged in meaningful conversations with politicians, business leaders, and community activists. She shared her experiences, answered questions, and offered insights into the challenges faced by the transgender community. When it was time for her to take the stage and give her speech, Trisha felt a familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach. But as she looked out at the supportive faces in the audience, she found her voice. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Trisha, and I'm here to talk to you about the power of authenticity, acceptance, and love." As she spoke, sharing her journey from fear to self-acceptance, Trisha could see the impact her words were having. There were nods of understanding, tears of empathy, and moments of revelation rippling through the crowd. "We all have the right to be our true selves," Trisha concluded, her voice filled with passion. "And when we create a world where everyone feels safe to do so, we all benefit. Thank you." The applause that followed was thunderous. As Trisha made her way back to her seat, she was stopped by countless individuals offering words of support and thanks. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. Later that night, as Trisha prepared for bed, she reflected on how far she had come. From the scared individual hiding in her apartment to a confident woman speaking at galas and making a difference in her community, it had been quite a journey. As she hung up her red gown, Trisha's fingers lingered on the soft fabric. Each stitch represented a step in her journey, a moment of growth and self-discovery. She smiled, thinking of all the beautiful garments yet to be created, all the stories yet to be told. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.